Ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, though, please give a huge round of applause here for Yancy Ribbens.
All right, thank you. Excuse me. Just wanted to thank everybody for their attendance today. Again, my name is Yancy Ribbens. I've been an employee with Nagios for about 2 years now, and I'm also a full-time student at the University of Minnesota. And today what we'll be talking about is Nagios XI and Nagios Reactor. In particular, I'll be covering some of the newest developments that have happened with both of these two products as far as Windows monitoring is concerned. Specifically, we'll be looking at Active Directory integration with Nagios. We'll be looking at agent deployment with Nagios XI, and we'll also be looking at some of the new features with Nagios Reactor, how you can tie into WMI and also do software installs straight from Reactor. Okay, so first we'll begin by talking about Active Directory. Active Directory, as you guys may know, is a way for you to manage your environment and centralize all of your group policies, all of your users. It stores a database of all of your computers in your environment. So we'll be looking at how we can take advantage of that, of this with Nagios XI. So one of the challenges is how do we, well, first off, the Active Directory component, number one, once it's been configured, it allows you to use Active Directory for your authentication. And number two, the latest Active Directory component that I've developed allows you to also select and bulk import users from Active Directory. For some of you who are familiar with the current component, currently there is the ability to do the authentication. However, at the current time, you have to manually create each user within Nagios XI. So it doesn't really save a lot of time, but the new component will allow you to import users from containers, OUs, and Active Directory groups. So essentially, it will create a two-way communication, you can think of it as. Okay, so just a brief overview of how the configuration would happen. So from Nagios XI, if you were to go into the Manage Components and then Active Directory Integration, the first time you would set this up, you would click on the configuration icon, as denoted by the large blue arrow. So once you've selected the Active Directory integration configuration, you're prompted with the following screens. So the top option, Enable Active Directory Authentication. So this option allows for, if there is a user that exists on the domain controller, Nagios XI will use the domain controller to authenticate the user. So, and the other options, you have the account suffix, the base DN, the domain controllers. These are all specific to your Active Directory environment. You can give it a list of domain controllers separated by a comma. So in my example, I just have the one box at 5.90, but you can populate this with all of your domain controllers. And then the last option is security. By default, the Windows Active Directory domain controller does not have security enabled. So unless you specifically configured security on your domain controller, I would suggest leaving that value as none unless you have configured it otherwise. Okay, so the newest Active Directory integration piece, once it's installed, you'll see an Active Directory users on the left-hand pane. And this will be available in Nagios XI 2014. So you'll see an Active Directory users, and you can essentially select that. And then we'll take a look at how the process of importing a user will look. Okay, So currently I'm showing the Manage Users page. So this is all of the users that already exist in Nagios XI. As you can see, there's only one current user. So after clicking Active Directory Users, I'm going to populate the username and password with the name of a domain controller administrator account. And so then currently it browses the top level of the domain controller and displays your containers, your OUs, and your groups. So then this allows you to basically browse and pull in the users that you want to be able to authenticate to Nagios XI that are already in your Active Directory domain controller. Okay, so for this example, I created a pretend OU called Starfleet. And then there's a bunch of the Star Trek vessels, I guess. And we all know that Enterprise is the only one that matters. So I'll select Enterprise, and I have sub-OUs here of the bridge, engineering, and sickbay. So I'm going to go ahead and just choose the select all to select everybody from the bridge. Okay. Not sure. Okay. So once all of the users have been selected, just back up a quick step here. So once you've selected users, you can hit the Add New Users icon in the top. And then basically it will pull in all of the account-specific information from Active Directory. So you don't also have to manually populate that as well. If there is not an email address associated with the account in Active Directory, this will flag that user and allow you to manually input an email address at this time. So in this case, Beverly Crusher does not have an email address in Active Directory, so I'm just manually assigning her one. Other options available, this will look very familiar for those of you who have used the Manage Users page. But basically all of these settings will then be applied to the users that are being pulled in from Active Directory. So you have the option to give them admin privileges or just normal user. You can set their language preferences, date and time formats. You can also make sure that they're monitoring contacts so that they have privileges from within the core config manager. And then the other standard user permissions are available down here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just give them full access since they are members of the enterprise. It shows that there have been 8 users successfully added, and as you can see, we now have these 8 users available within XI. So at this time, they have no password, and so whenever the users enter a password, instead of checking with XI's local database, it will instead connect against the Active Directory database and make sure that the user has a valid password. And if they do have a valid password, they will be allowed access to Nagios. So in this example, I'm just using bcrusher, and I'm putting in her Active Directory password now. And so at this point, it's hitting the Active Directory controller and querying for the password, and it was valid, so she was granted access. Okay, so then the next example, so as well as OUs and containers, you can also pull in from Active Directory security groups or distribution groups. So I'm just going to go through a real quick example of how that would look. So again, I'm selecting Starfleet. I'm opening up the USS Enterprise container. And I've created a group called the Away Team. So this makes it easy to basically create a group for all of your Nagios users that you want to have access to. You can put them in one group here. So once the group's open, you can see these users. I was thinking about putting a red shirt guy that always dies as one of the users, but it seemed like a lot of work since he's just going to die anyway, so probably won't need access. So again, the process is going to look very similar. Basically select all the users we want to import, give them our privileges, and they've been added. So one other thing that is currently in development, so Active Directory is good for a lot more than just user management. As you know, it contains records of all of your computers. In this Active Directory browser, you can see that it also identifies different computers in the domain. So we have the actual domain controller itself, and then since this is just my dev environment, it's fairly small. There's only one other computer listed. However, one of the new wizards that I've been developing will basically allow you to pull in all of the computers from Active Directory and start monitoring those. So you won't have to, it's akin to the bulk import wizard, but it will instead use the Active Directory as a source. Okay, so now for the next portion of the presentation, I'm going to discuss npush. Some of you might have seen this presentation last year as well. So essentially, why is npush useful and what is its goals? So as you know, any advanced monitoring typically requires some type of agent to be installed. There's wonderful solutions that are agentless, such as WMI. But sometimes you have an environment where you need more flexibility and control. So you'll want to install some piece of software on that remote machine, such as an agent. The agent basically allows you to write a custom script or pull data differently than like a default WMI agentless situation would allow. The other reason that npush is extremely useful, beyond being much faster than any person could remotely remote into each machine and install, it automates the configuration and deployment of the software. So essentially, it will allow you to configure all of the steps from Nagios XI as if you were a user on that local machine, and it will push out each one. Another huge advantage of npush is that it requires no remote software on the Windows side. It essentially installs all the software using RPC calls. For some of you who have been in the Windows environment for a while, you might be familiar with tools like psexec. So essentially, npush uses the same hooks in the operating system to instruct the clients to download and install software from Nagios XI. So just a little overview. The first step is npush essentially creates an RPC call to all of the hosts that you want to install the agent against. Step 2 is once the host has been contacted, the host is then directed to download the agent software that you want installed on the Windows machine. So this is extremely useful. Another cool feature is with npush, you can also configure a different web server, or say you wanted to use some different location to install the software from. That can also be configured in npush. And I have another more advanced example in Nagios Reactor where we're doing just that. And then the last step, once the host has the file on its local machine, npush then gives it the command to install the software. So here's where a lot of the configuration takes place, because we can basically run the MSI exec, for example, with whatever silent install instructions we'd like. This is all configured through the web front end, and then the silent installer runs those commands on the command line on each Windows machine. Sorry, guys. I'm not sure if that's my video adapter or... You guys like yellow, right? Okay, let's try the under the... Okay, as long as I don't touch it, it should be okay. Okay. All right, so another cool feature of npush also is it allows for concurrent installations. So we could give it 100 different hosts, and it will concurrently launch the installer against all of those different hosts with a fraction of a second delay, so it doesn't completely kill the npush server when it's launched. So in this demonstration, the action is we're going to install NSClient++ 0.3.9. Also, that dropdown has the uninstall option if you wanted to uninstall NSClient, that version on all machines. You have the option for single or a list of hosts, which we just talked about. And then you have the username or password. This would probably be your domain username or password that would be used to authenticate against the host and run the installer. Okay, and in the agent configuration section, a lot of you who have installed NSClient++ manually, this will probably look familiar because this is basically geared towards giving the user the same flexibility to install NSClient against many hosts as they have when they're just running the local installer. So the top input allows you to specify the host that can query the machine. So this will be your Nagios XI machine in most cases. The password, so if you're using a check-NT, you can define the password there. And then below you have all of the common installation options. So if you wanted to use check NRPE instead, which is advisable, you could select it there, enable common plugins. So essentially this just runs the MSI exec silent installer with the appropriate switches on the remote hosts. Okay, and we'll take a look at how this will come on, play. There it goes. Okay, so here's the dialog boxes that we talked about, or the field inputs. So I'm putting in administrator and my user name and password. On the right-hand side, you can see the program files directory is exposed on the remote hosts. So once we run the installer, you'll basically see NSClient++ appear in the program files list. And then we'll just open up the nsc.ini file to ensure that it has the appropriate settings. So here I'm going to put in the allowed host. And I'll also be putting in some password that I want to use. In this case, I'm using a check-NT type. So, and then selecting my configuration options. So once you hit submit, it's going to basically run both of these jobs simultaneously. And as you can see, it's successfully installed on .90, which is a Windows 2003 server. Looks like I was running a 2008 server in this video as well. And then I'm just scrolling through the INI file, seeing if the configuration actually took. And looks like it did on this one. So that's an example of running npush from within Nagios XI. We'll now take a look at some more advanced options that Nagios Reactor gives us. So just an introduction, Nagios Reactor is it's essentially a powerful decision engine. So you can basically use it to check for conditions in your environment. And if some conditions are met, it will take the appropriate action. Since this is a Windows-based presentation, I'll be going over some of the key features that Nagios Reactor presents for Windows administration. So just a quick demonstration. So what you can do is Nagios Reactor has full npush integration. So not only can it install NS Client, it can install NerdsWin, and it can also install NCPA, which is a new upcoming agent that hopefully you guys were able to see the presentation on yesterday by Nick Scott. So NS Client, as you know, is an active agent. NerdsWin is a completely passive agent. That's one that I developed some time ago. It essentially accepts jobs and then submits the results back passively. And then NCPA is basically a culmination of both. It can be either an active agent or a passive agent, as well as running on Linux and Windows machines. So it's cross-platform Nagios cross-platform agent, yeah. And Nick Scott's sitting back there smiling because he's the genius behind the agent. Okay, so as an example, here's a chain that we put together that's a pretty fun one. So the only thing it's going to do is it's going to reach out and check the program files directory and see if NS Client++ does not exist. If it does not exist, then what we're going to do is we're going to install the NS Client agent. Okay, so here's my Windows machine, and here's an example of the Nagios Reactor interface. So on the top here, you have your if condition. So this is the conditions that if met, then it will carry out the then statements. If they're not met, it will carry out the else statements. For those of you who have done any programming, this probably looks very intuitive. The idea was to design it in such a way that anyone could use it, though. And there's a ton of pre-programmed conditions and actions that are extremely useful, as well as the ability to create your own. So in this one, we're checking that if that path does not exist, then we're going to install the NS Client agent. So in this interface, it's very similar to XI. I'm giving it the admin account, the username, the password, the allowed host. Also, I added the ability to change the install location if so desired, and then start the service once it's been installed. Okay, so once that's been saved, so now I'm going to go ahead and run this chain manually. These chains can be invoked remotely through any type of get or put request, or post request, sorry. But for testing, I'm just running it on the local machine here. So I just paused it. So as you can see, well, maybe you can't see because it's kind of, the font's small, but what it's doing is it's going out and it's checking to see if the program file directory exists or not. And there's a true statement down there which says it's detected that the program file does not exist on that remote machine. So it's going to carry out its action to install NS Client. Okay, so it says the chain ran successfully. And same as before, we're looking at the INI file to ensure that all the options were set. So Nagios Reactor has a powerful WMI interface that I've developed. Here's just a few quick examples of things that you can check against. So you can check to see like how many CPU cores exist on the machine. What is its DNS name? Is it a part of a domain name, or is it currently a part of a domain or not? You can query specific startup options from the registry. You can see what user is logged in. And you can also check to see, for instance, what the size of some remote file is. This allows you to really automate your Windows environment in a way that is extremely beneficial. And you can even reference even more if there's not some predefined one already created. It has the ability where you can basically give it like a WMI class, like Win32, and then you can reference some value in that class and test for that condition. And if there is not met, then you can take some specific action. Okay, so now we're going to look at a little bit more advanced feature of Nagios Reactor. So in this demonstration, instead of having the install file be pulled from Reactor, I'm instead pointing it to a different location. For example, what I'm doing actually in this demonstration is I'm pointing it to an external website where the installer is housed. Now, in your environment, that might be a really bad idea because you don't want to depend on some external resource. But you could set up some different HTTP server in your environments. You could do a number of really cool things with this idea. So let's just take a look at how this is put together. So under the conditions, we're going to choose a Windows WMI condition. So here's the current built-in features. So test if a file path exists. So now I'm going to give it the remote IP address, the username to validate against the WMI provider, and then the path on that remote machine. So we're checking for NS Client++. And so I actually made a mistake there because we want to check if it does not exist. So I'm going to go back in and I'm going to negate the condition. So now this will be true if that program file directory does not exist. Okay, so then the action. So here we're just going to deploy, I'm just going to select the generic deploy any software and put in the username and password. And so just for fun, I'm going to go to actually where the MSI is currently housed on NS Client's website and paste in the URL directly there. We're going to give it some file name. So essentially, it's going to direct the clients to go out and pull that file And then once that file is placed on the local machine, it's going to run it with the following arguments. So essentially, I'm just doing the longhand of what some of the built-in pre-baked installers do for you. So I'm just putting in all the silent install switches that the MSI exec will be run with. So right here, I'm just specifying what the allowed host is. So this is super handy. This is something like, for example, you could have it install antivirus software from some server in your environment. Some condition could be that, say, a new Windows computer joins the domain, and you want to make sure that some software is pushed to that machine. That's an example of a really powerful condition that could be run. So essentially what's happening now is it's going out to the remote website. It's pulling down the MSI file. It's a little slow because it actually has to fetch that file externally. And it's showing that it installed in about, the whole process took approximately 13 seconds. So there's a lot of really cool features with Nagios Reactor. Other ideas with Reactor, there could be conditions that essentially, if a new user joins the Active Directory domain controller, then add that user to Nagios XI, or if it's removed, then remove it from Nagios XI. Same idea could apply to computers and any software you can think of. Okay, so that wraps up the presentation. I'd like to open it up now for any questions or comments.
Well, first a comment I would like to say, NS Client++ is not active. It's active, passive, or pretty much anything you want it to be. But are you actually using the...
That's true. It does have, you mean with the NSCA capability?
NSCA and RDP, syslog, well, you name it. But
True.
Are you actually using the MSI options in the GUI? Because I'm not sure they're stable across versions. So I'm not sure that is super good idea.
Well, for the 0.3.9, I'm using the MSI exec silent install commands.
Okay, I need to check if they're stable because I'm not sure, but I'll try to make them stable anyway. But
Okay.
I haven't really considered it.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Is there also the capability of scheduling the deployment during a later time? So let's just say you have a window overnight that has to do the deployment, but you want to schedule it. You know you have to do the deployment of these agents between X and Y. So let's just say you schedule it during the day, but you want to run at night.
With Nagios Reactor, there's an advanced scheduling system where you can give it a specific date, time, range window for which you want some conditions or actions to be run. So yes, that would certainly be possible given some time window. Yep. From within Reactor. Currently within Nagios XI's implementation, there is not that capability.
Okay. And also, does it support fully qualified domain names as opposed to IPs?
Yes. You can give it, yes, a DNS name. Yep.
Anyone else?
Can you use it to deploy against a host group and then get a report what hosts were successfully deployed and what were not?
That was a really good suggestion, and someone actually presented the idea last year. No, currently it's not, there's no implementation to run it against a set host group. However, I think it's a great idea and something I would like to add in. But.
Anyone else?
Just a quick question. What's the licensing around Reactor?
Reactor, similar licensing as XI. So it's a separate product completely. We're looking at a release date of December to January, last time I checked.
Is it limited to deploying MSIs
if it's an exe, like say Firefox or something like that, which is only an exe, can you deploy that?
Yeah, it could actually be any software in the demonstration that I gave. So as long as the installer has a silent install option, you just essentially give it that command argument. So you tell it the file you want to download, and then it will invoke that installer with those options. Great question.
Anyone else? Is there anything you're...
Oh.
Oh, here we go.
With the authentication with AD, with entering multiple domain controllers, does it do the round robin, and is there a timeout between each check?
That is something that I do not know off the top of my head. I believe it goes from the first domain controller down, whatever the order of the list is, I believe, but I'm not entirely sure on that. So if you'd like, I can research that and get back to you.
And also, importing feature. Are you able to import from different domains that are not in your AD list?
Different domains that are not in, that are not specified. Oh, well, so when you're going through the configuration, you're specifying like your base DN and everything. And so what you're asking is if you can instead use a different Active Directory controller?
Correct. So your base DN is for authentication,
Okay.
but you have the ability to import hosts. So if you have hosts in different domains, so whatever, you've set up a different domain for dev, for QA, but you have a central Nagios server that manages them, or monitors them, I should say. You want to be able to import those hosts as well.
Okay. Like, are you speaking, like if you specify different, if you wanted to use different base DN names within your environment?
Correct, but they won't be part of your authentication.
I am not entirely certain on that. I'll get with you after the presentation because I'm not quite certain.
Okay.
Sorry.
No worries.
Anyone else? And before you go, Yancy, anything you're currently working on? Any upcoming projects you'd like to share with us?
Well, currently I've been doing a lot of work on the Nagios Reactor, as you saw, adding in features that make it powerful for Windows monitoring. And that's basically the biggest project that I've been working on lately. So there's a ton that Nagios Reactor has to offer beyond the Windows environment as well. So I'm very excited about that product.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for Yancy Ribbens.